Welcome to today's explainer. If you're an early childhood educator, or honestly, just someone who is absolutely fascinated by how we teach the basic building blocks of language, you are in the exact right place. Today, we're exploring a seriously fantastic lesson module from Crimson Grove. It's called J is for Joyful Journeys. We're going to break down exactly how this curriculum takes the simple, maybe even mundane act of learning the letter J and transforms it into this sweeping, captivating adventure for young minds. Because let's be real, learning to read shouldn't feel like a chore, right? It should be an expedition. And establishing that whole journey vibe right out of the gate, it completely changes how students engage with the material.
So consider this our treasure map, or our lesson itinerary for today's joyful journey. First up is the departure, where we set the theme. Then we have the encounters, meaning the letter and words. Next, we'll navigate the terrain to see reading in context. And finally, we arrive at the destination for practice and tracing.
All right, let's kick things off with Section 1, the departure. Setting the theme.
Look, before a single letter is even written on the chalkboard, we absolutely have to establish our core philosophy. Early education is fundamentally rooted in joy and exploration. Just imagine bringing this to life in your own classroom. You've got happy children traveling, a rugged jeep, a soaring jet, a wild jungle, a floating jellyfish, maybe even a cool treasure map on the wall. By rapidly layering all these visual ideas around the room, you're painting a really vivid picture. You're literally immersing the kids in this optimistic, adventurous aesthetic. They aren't just sitting at boring desks. No way. They are explorers gearing up for a grand voyage. This visual groundwork actually cognitively primes their imaginations for the learning that's about to hit them. Okay, let's dive into this next part. Section 2, the encounters. Meeting the letter JJ.
Now that their little imaginations are totally fired up, it is time to introduce the star of the show. First, we clearly define the letter J as a consonant, and this is actually super vital for establishing the foundational theory. We tell the students, just directly and simply, that the letter J makes the J sound. And then, we immediately anchor that abstract sound to concrete, highly visual words pulled straight from our classroom theme. Jam, jar, jeep, jellyfish. This instantly, and I mean instantly, connects the auditory lesson, the actual sound of the letter, right back to the visual environment we just built together.
Once that theory is locked in, the lesson immediately pivots right into active participation. The curriculum actually prompts the class with a big "let's say it together." Just imagine the energy of this class chant. JJ says ja 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 ja. It's such a fantastic, seamless transition from just sitting quietly and listening to vocalizing and practicing out loud. It gets the energy up, it builds the shared classroom experience, and it physically engages the students' vocal cords in actually producing that specific consonant sound. It's brilliant.
Still moving through the encounters, we come to building the JJ vocabulary. This is where our itinerary takes us from isolated sounds to actual, full words. Okay, so we've mastered the isolated sound, right? Now we actually construct full words. Just look at the sheer variety of the 20 featured words presented in this Crimson Grove curriculum. We aren't just looking at some random, boring list of nouns. We've got tangible objects, things like jam, jar, jeep, jacket, and juice. But we also have action words, jump, jog, joke, judge. And honestly, perhaps the most important for our whole adventurous theme, we have concepts and places, things like jungle, joy, journey, January, and jellyfish. By offering this incredibly wide variety, educators can cater to totally different types of learners. Whether a kid is really drawn to action, physical objects, or just imaginative places, it builds a totally robust and dynamic vocabulary. Let's move to and see how this builds in Section 3, the terrain. Reading in context. And this brilliantly illustrates where we really step up the complexity. We're taking that isolated vocabulary we just learned and placing it right into reading context. We take our base vocabulary words, jeep and jungle, and apply them to a sentence that's meant to spark both sound and story. Jack drove a jeep through the jungle. Notice how heavily that J sound is emphasized here? Jack, jeep, jungle. This totally reinforces how the lesson builds directly from single word recognition all the way to actual reading comprehension. The student isn't just decoding letters anymore, they're actually decoding a narrative.
We see this contextual application just keep going here. We take jigsaw and we expand it to Jake completed a colorful jigsaw puzzle. Again, repeating the sound with Jake and jigsaw. We are giving them sentences that basically spark a little movie, a narrative right in their minds.
It keeps them totally hooked on that joyful journey of reading while synthesizing their brand new vocabulary into real, practical comprehension. It takes the words off the page and literally out into the wild.
Moving on to our final phase, Section 4, the destination, practice exercises. Okay, so we've introduced the theme, the sound, the words, and the context. Now let's take a look at the exact testing progression designed by Crimson Grove to actually solidify this knowledge. First up, circle the letter J out of lineup. This is your basic visual recognition. Second, match the word to the picture, like drawing a line from the word jar to a picture of a jar. This tests meaning. Third, fill in the missing letter for words like juice, which subtly moves them right toward spelling. Fourth, read and color sentences like the jellyfish is in the sea. This cleverly combines reading comprehension with a really fun motor activity. And finally, step 5, they independently write the letter J. It is honestly a perfect logical progression from simple recognition straight to active generation.
So the crucial point is how we close out the actual mechanics of the lesson, and we do that through tracing. The final exercises require students to repeatedly trace the uppercase J and the lowercase j, and then they move right on to tracing the full featured words themselves: jam, jar, jeep, juice, and jellyfish. Now, why does this matter so much? Well, because tracing locks in muscle memory. It bridges that gap between the mind recognizing the letter and the hand physically producing it. It ensures that the knowledge isn't just conceptual, it's practically applied. And it's preparing their fine motor skills for the absolute next adventure.
Which brings us to our final takeaway, featuring this incredibly inspiring footer quote straight from the Crimson Grove curriculum. Learning is the greatest journey. This honestly wraps up the entire module so beautifully. It reminds both the educator and the student that mastering the alphabet isn't just a chore, it's just the first step in a lifelong expedition of discovery. Today we've seen how to set the scene, teach the sounds, build the sentences, and practice the skills. So I'm going to leave you with this final provocative thought to consider as you plan out your very next lesson. Where will the letter J take your classroom next?